Alright, so this video is going to show you how to use our hardness testing machine for MSE408 Cartridge Rats lab. So let me walk you through some of the features that we're going to talk about as we use this machine. So as you can see, our testing hardness tester here, we have the start button. We have a turning wheel here that can move the anvil up and down. This is the anvil. We can simply lift it off and replace it with other styles of anvils. We also have a drawer that contains this box over here. This is all of our accessories. We have the indenters. For example, this indenter here that we're going to be using. It's a little hard to get the focus on it, but I'll take some pictures of that. We also have standards for testing to make sure that we have the right hardness. So I'm going to grab one of those as well. They just look like pieces of metal. So I'm going to grab one of those. So this is the indenter. It has a little groove here, and we're going to basically place it in the machine, and it basically sticks with a magnet in there. So that's the indenter. We have the anvil. This allows us to move the anvil up and down. The start button, and then up here we have the dial. There are two readings there. You see a black scale and a red scale. This will be used for different types of testing. Up here is the guide for what we need to set. This is a Rockwell hardness testing machine. And we're going to start by using the B scale. So this says that we should use the 1/16 diameter ball bearing for the indenter. And it also says that we should use over here the 100, and this refers to the weight. So this is going to be a 100 kilogram weight, and we can select that over here, and it should just read 100. See if I can get a little closer so you can read that. So it reads 100, and you can spin that for the different weights that you see up here. All right, so one last thing. This is going to be specific for our Cartridge Rats materials. In that container, I'm going to select a different anvil. If you kind of see, this is a really small anvil. This is actually the top part. So I'm going to switch out for this large piece and put this over in the container and put this small anvil, and I'm going to have to lower it down so I don't hit the indenter. So that's back in there. And so now you see it's a very small platform for putting the piece. And the reason I do this is because some of our pieces from the rolling process may be curved. And so to make sure that that curvature doesn't affect the flat plane that we want to look at, we use the smallest anvil possible. And so that's this little spot anvil, as we call it, as opposed to the larger platform that was there. So we've got it set on 100. We've got the 1/16 ball bearing. So I've checked that already. We could check that by measuring the size of the ball bearing with calipers. And we have this all set up. So the last thing we're going to do before we take measurements is we're going to go up here to the side. And I apologize for this, but we're going to hit the power button. And so we're going to make sure that that's on. And if we look back here, there's a light that's turned off. So the light turns on when we switch the power button. So that you should see that light on to indicate that the power's on. All right, so that's the basic sort of setup of the machine that you're going to do every time before you start operation. And so what we'll do here in a second is run the standard, and we do this every time that we start using a new scale in a different lab session. And then we are going to go through the process of running a hardness measurement on a piece of the cartridge brass that I have with us. Okay, now I'm going to be showing you the basic operation of this hardness tester. And to do that, we're going to start with a standard. So I've got my standard here. You can kind of see it's already been used before, but if I look close on this, and it's hard to get that in focus on the image, but it is for HRB, which is the scale, if you remember, that we're going to be using. So this is my piece. I've already got the machine turned on. I've got the right anvil, and I've got the right indenter set up. So what I'm going to do is find a place on the test block that is free. So our general rule, as you should be aware, is that we want to have our indentations that we make on the metal at least 3 diameters away from another indentation and also away from the edge. That's our general rule. The reason for this is we don't want the deformation from that previous indentation to affect our results. So I'm going to select an area down here in the corner, and I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to start moving the anvil, and you might be able to see it slowly move up until I start to make contact and I'm in the right location. So at this point I've made contact. You can see if I take my hand away, the block is supported by the machine, and so it is in contact with the block here. So I've got that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep moving this in the same direction up until my dial up here, I have 2 of them. You can see one is pointed down currently, and we have another that has this little curve in it. I want those both to line up here where it says 0 on the black scale, 30 on the red scale, and below it it says set. So this is setting it, this is setting the instrument. And you can see them start to move at this point, and they should both move until they're lined up. And I'm going to slowly do it at the end until they're just lined up together. So both of those are lined up together, and that is my initial position for this test. So beyond that, it's very simple. I'm going to hit the start button down here, and when I do that, you're going to see the dial up here start to move. So watch the dial when I hit the start button. The light will also go off back here. And so there's an initial position after it moves where it stops, and then it moves a second time, and the light comes back on. So you'll see this a couple times when we do this. But how we're going to read this is we're going to look at the dial, and specifically we're going to look at the needle that is straight, not the curved one. That's part of the set. So that's only what it's used for. So we used, I'm going to zoom here to the dial. So we used a ball indenter, if you can see that. So we are going to read the red scale, is what that means. And so you can see the red scale here is what we're going to be looking at for this test. And so you see that it's between 60 and 70 in this scale, and hopefully I can get a little closer and let you actually read that reading. And then I'm going to step back a little bit and see if I can interpret it. So I is really the best way to do this. So it is 2 markings past the 60, and overall there's 20 of them. So essentially that reading would be 60, but then you would add 1 hardness measurement to that because it's 2 past that. So it's basically 61 on this HRB scale. So I'll zoom back in so hopefully that you can read this on your own and get a feel for reading these measurements so that you can trust when we do this, we're giving you the data that you need. All right, so that registers a 61 on that scale. So when I'm done, let me give you back the overall view here. So I'm finished with this. Make sure that you write down your reading if you're operating this in person. And then when you are done, you can rotate the knob in the opposite direction to lower the anvil and remove your sample. Since we're using the spot anvil, you want to make sure that you're holding this so it doesn't fall out. And so you also make a general practice to view the indentations that you've made. You can take a picture of it and so forth to make sure that you're have them the appropriate number of diameters away. So always look at that in this case. So our value was 61. That's what we read. And the standard here, and I'll give a picture of this. You might be able to see it. It actually says 61.68 plus or minus 1.0. So we are within that 61.68 plus or minus 1 because we reread 61. So that was a valid test. It tells us we're ready to go for measuring our own sample. So we'll take a break here and come back and actually look at hardness of our cartridge brass test sample. Okay, so we're back, and I've got a piece of cartridge brass which we have rolled. This piece is actually from a previous semester, but the procedure is going to be the same. You see that we have previous markings on it, and you can see they're spaced out appropriately. And so we're going to pick a spot. It's good if you are doing this on your own in the lab to make sure that you do it in a systematic way. When you make a measurement, write it down in your lab notebook and correspond that to the measurement that you made, just in case there are any variations along the sample. And so we've already set up with the standard, as you just saw. And so I'm going to put this machine, and you're going to basically see me go through the same procedure that we just did to get the hardness measurement of this piece of brass. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and place it and line it up so that I'm 3 diameters away from another reading and also the edge. And I rotate the anvil so that it makes contact with the indenter and the anvil. And right now it hasn't, the dial hasn't been affected. So now I'm going to keep going. You'll see the dial start to move. You see the dial moving. And again, we're going to make those in the set position, so both the arrows, the curved and the straight one, are in the set position, lined up perfectly. So that is our set position, both of these lined up perfectly. Now I'm ready to hit the start button. Again, the light back here is on. When I hit the start button, it'll go away until the measurement is done. So hit the start button. This is also going to move. Start. You see this start to move. The light's off. It holds there at that position and then moves one final time, and the light comes back on, and that tells us that the test is over. Okay, so now we are ready to read the measurement. We can leave the sample there for a second, and I'm going to bring the camera in. All right, so again, we are on the HRB scale. If we go up here to the top, HRB, we used the diameter, the correct diameter and weight. And so we are on the B scale. It's red, which indicates ball, which means we're going to be on this red interior scale. And so we can see it, the straight arrow is up here in the top. Let me get you a better view of that. There you go. And so again, note the position of it. I will take this back for a second. And then I will look at it real quick and see if our measurements are the same. So that is between 30 and 40. It is 4/10 of the way from between 30 and 40. So that is going to be 34 on the scale that we have, which is Rockwell Hardness B, or HRB. So that's where we at. Again, take my measurement, confirm that you have the same. And if that's the case, we're going to come back here. I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise until I can move the sample out. I'm holding it. And then if you remember what it looked like before and after, I put this mark down here so you can confirm that it's far enough away from the edge. So this one right here, far away from the edge and other indentations. So that's how we collect hardness measurements. When you are done for the day, all you have to do is, again, come over here to the right side, on the side here, where it'll say power off on, and we're going to switch it off. You'll see the light goes off, and that is all. You can leave the indenter and the anvil, or you can put them away in the container after you are done, depending on if anybody else is going to use them after you. So that's the state you want to leave it in when you are done. So beyond that, when you get data from us, we will take pictures and label the positions so that you can correspond the hardness value that we're giving you to the value here. So you'll always get those that information. We'll give you pictures of the sample, and we'll also give you pictures of the readout on this scale. So you're going to have to read the dial here, and I think you've done this in other classes before. If we have to change scales, again, the scales are up here that are of use. If a reading starts to go off the end of the scale, we will note the change, and we will tell you the weight that we're using up here. We will tell you the size of the indenter, and also the weight that we've had to select over here. So we'll make sure we document that all for your benefit when you get these measurements. All right, that is how we use the hardness tester for this lab. You will get data and be processing that data to see the trends and mechanical properties for cartridge rats.